like to introduce Matt Highway from NZAM to talk about integrated catchment management next. Matt's focus is on working with clients to develop strategic approaches that meet tangible outcomes. Matt has worked in catchment, biodiversity and land management for over 25 years with regional councils and the primary sector. The key for Matt is to ensure efficient, effective approaches that work from end to end and can endure in the long term. This approach has led to design of tools and scalable solutions. Matt also operates as the CEO of New Zealand Association of Resource Managers. NZAM is an association of professionals involved in natural resource management, particularly with land and water. They aim to promote good practice, competence and ethics in resource management, alongside the effective communication and transfer of information between members, other resource managers and the community.
Kia ora koutou e te whānau. Great to be here. Before I start, I'd just like to say a massive thanks to New Zealand Landcare Trust, who do an amazing job for such a long time. And if we can put our hands together for the farmers and catchment coordinators, I was just blown away this morning by what you're doing and what you're achieving, sometimes in just such a short time frame. So yeah, thank you. Okay, so this is potentially something you know a huge amount about the subject, since this is a Catchment Management Day, but something that I'm, can you hear me okay with the mic? Cool, something that I'm really passionate about. So is catchment management. So what we're going to talk about is a little bit about what sort of integrated catchment management is. We won't go into that too much. Why our people and our skills matter so much. So skills are just so crucial. We talked about people so many times this morning. And a short example of catchment management. And I guess a little kind of question really around whether catchment management is working for us at the moment versus regulation. And I think we've heard a lot of kind of answers already this morning. So, integrated catchment management. What is it? Well, I asked ChatGPT a couple of days ago what it was, as you guys probably do as well. I've been working in this field for 25 years and realised I didn't actually know. So I Googled it, gave me several pages, then I looked at the literature, also several pages of what catchment management is. So I decided that was too long. So like any good operational person, sorry, I pressed the wrong thing, I apologise. Like any good person who's operational, I just made it up. So I think, what do you guys think? So I think catchment management is action at catchment scale to enable change to a new state. And I can hear a lot of that this morning, whether it's people, social, water quality, a range of things. So maybe that aligns, maybe it doesn't. I think there's two parts of it as well. There's catchment management, which we do most of the time, and then there's integrated catchment management, which we probably should be doing, and it's quite challenging. So integrated catchment management, in my mind, is really seeking an outcome. So if we've got a swimming outcome, we want to swim in the Manawatu River year-round, we have to be integrated, right? We have to work with regulators, industry, urban people, rural community, and industry that are building things as well. So we've got to try and work in a whole holistic kind of way. If you're on the other side, and this is where I mostly work, is if you're seeking to change an indicator, like planting riparian zones of 20 kilometres or do 50 farm plans, increase habitat by 10%, probably more just looking at landscape management and catchment management. So the reason why I say this is, press the right button, I think integrated catchment management is potentially the peak of land and water management. And just bear with me while I say this. We know that it needs to be large scale. We talked about some of these. I think some of the catchments I've worked on are smaller than some of the farms that you guys have worked on. Long term, look at the Horizons program around the Sluey. 19 years, I think, this year. It takes a long time to make this sort of change, and that's really come through. And there's lots of components to it as well. Sorry, you probably won't be able to see any of those points, but integrated catchment management really needs purpose and direction. We need a huge amount of information and data, and I know we'll probably cover some of that in our panel this afternoon. And we need integration between organisations, and it's great to see so many of you talking about that this morning. on the other side of things, this is where I'm going, and where NZAM really heads is around capability building. People, we think people are the most important asset in catchment management or land and water management, and we need a range of skills. So I think on the bottom of that pyramid, we need strategic skills, people skills, which many of you got in abundance by the sound of it, and doing a great job from a partnership point of view. And then we need, technical skills around biodiversity, sort of biophysical, geophysical, cultural, social kind of skills as well, real technical skills. And then, working at place, which is what was really encouraging around the ground up approach. I think you've got to understand the community, the policies in those places, and then we're sort of getting our skill set all together for integrated catchment management. Now, the challenge though is these skills don't come easily or quickly, and it can take, sorry, I did it again, I apologise, pressed the wrong button. It can take a really huge amount of time to build these skills. So if you, like I do, I sort of cheat. I know that I have a whole lot of deficiencies, so I need to work with a whole bunch of other people to fill in those deficiencies to get integrated catchment management sort of happening, or any kind of catchment management. So I think skills are critical, and that's really the subject of where I'm going today. So I'll just change tact a little bit and talk about the importance and current state of skills. So we all know this guy, probably not personally, but one of the most skilled guys around, right? Albert Einstein. And he said, if I only had 1 hour to save the world, I would spend 55 minutes defining the problem and only 5 minutes finding the solution. I nearly said funding the solution. Just how ingrained is that in catchment management? Funding the solution is also good, by the way, MPI, MFE, others. So I think it's really important that we go fast, and farmers are amazing at going fast at a problem. We understand it, we get together when we want to do action, it's great. But unfortunately, sometimes we don't always move in the wrong direction, but moving on a tangential direction can get you further from your goals. And I think this is where skill at planning is potentially the most important part, in my opinion. So NZAM has a really focused on building capability for people like you and I, skilled people or people working in the land and water field, and we'd want you to join our membership, of course. But what we do is we have a capability assessment program. So it assesses capability across the country. We can analyse it. It's really there designed to help people build their skills, but we can also analyse it from an organisational or regional or national perspective as well, which is really cool. So we look at it across 13 different capability areas, and it runs through a massive matrix, spits out some data. So if you look at this one, Horizons region, Manawatu, what that graph is telling us is we've got heaps of advisors, I think about 50 advisors that have gone through our program. Most of them in these blue lines are introductory level. So most of our advisors across these skill areas are still pretty new in their career. And then we've got some bigger gaps down the bottom there in the green, which is the advanced skills. So I think there might be a bit of a shortage in highly skilled people, but we're really growing, which is amazing. So across the country, what we've found is about 70% of our advisors have less than 3 years experience. Advisors are, catchment coordinators. We've had a huge boost in catchment coordinators, which is amazing. And regional council staff, MPI, MFE, funders, others that have gone through. And so we're just new, we're really growing as a new trade. My view is we need a bit of consistency around that skill though, and we need it across a range of organisations, so we're all talking the same thing. So that's funders, policymakers, regulators and implementers, people like me and you. So I like to think of catchment management and skill building, I suppose, or how it's all operating using the Pareto distribution, or better known as the 80-20 rule. So the 80-20 rule is something like, 20% of the people in your organisation do 80% of the work. We've probably all been there. 20% of the guys on Tinder get 80% of the dates. 20% of the farmers, who was talking about farmer meetings? 20% of the farmers probably drink 80% of the beer at an event. Something like that. So the 80-20 rule, I think it's really interesting from a people point of view. I agree with everything that was said this morning, because People are the biggest asset by far. They're 80% of this challenge, easily. And we've grown it hugely thanks to organisations like MPI, MFE, regional councils, Landcare Trust, Mountains to Sea. We've grown this great new trade. So we're in a good place. The other side of it, though, is kind of coming from if you remember that skill pyramid, the central part, which is around the science, I suppose, the biophysical, the cultural, the geophysical stuff. So if we can nail that down, and I'm probably preaching to the converted here, we might be able to just work in a small part of our catchment, doing smaller things to crank the lever much further and get 80% of our gains. So it works, the Pareto distribution works that way as well. And if I show you that just in a very small example. So Manawatu, has anyone been to this part of the Waikato before? South of Hamilton, near the airport, Ohaupo? Nick, thank you, you're from around there, okay. Well done. So this is, sorry, it's a little bit hard to see. So this is a very small catchment, tiny catchment, 6,500 hectares, something like that. So it would be just the corner of one of your farms that you were talking about earlier in like the Rangataki. But it's a good example, a simple example of an approach around the 80-20 rule. So this is in the central, I suppose, Waikato. It drains straight into, down this little point there, drains straight into the river called the Waipa River, and then that flows into the Waikato River. And the Waikato, of course, has got heaps of stuff going on for it, heaps of funding and investment and multi-generational approaches to restoring it. That bottom image there on the right-hand side is where the Waipa River hits during a flood, hits the Waikato River, and you can see it's just a big conveyor belt of sediment. So really different geology, different approaches there, and this Manawatu catchment is part of that. So they really want to try and improve what they're doing, reduce sediment into the Waipa and then the Waikato. So it's mostly dairy farms. Can you see? You probably can't see this. These blue images there are just lakes. There's dozens of lakes in this area as well, peat lakes primarily, and lots of high value biodiversity assets as well. Probably about 30 dairy farms-ish, and a couple of other, maybe only one or two other different types of farms. So they're all farming dairy farms. Anyway, hopefully set the scene there. So just bear with me. This is can you see that out the back, that this is red and green? Oh, cool. So bear with me on this. This is a model, and it's very typical, those of you using kind of science, I suppose, in a catchment map planning process to identify risk. Now this catchment is quite different, really different for a very small catchment and what the risk profile looks like, particularly from a water quality perspective. So on the left-hand side there, that's a phosphorus risk. So most of the phosphorus is likely, it's been modelled through slope and soil, geology, rainfall, probably some other things that I'm missing, to understand where the phosphorus kind of risk is coming from. Most of it in this catchment, and these are the extremes, this is a regional model, is coming from the upper catchment. If you look at nitrogen, which is the central one, most of the nitrogen risk is coming from the lower part of the catchment. The upper catchment is pretty much free of risk from a nitrogen point of view. And then erosion and sedimentation is coming from the central part of the catchment, which is where the Manawatu stream flows. So most of it is coming from riverbank erosion in this case. So, no catchment is created equally, so we have to sort of manage it differently as well. So if we look at this in more detail, so the phosphorus leaching type area, I suppose, or where there's not much nitrogen being lost, is this organic soil, peat farms, very flat, probably a bit of a typical, maybe if you're not from the Waikato, a typical view of highly drained, very wet kind of area, highly productive as well. So that's where phosphorus will be leaching through the organic soil, so it's quite a different soil profile, but nitrogen will get denitrified almost instantly in these areas. If we look at the lower part of the catchment, this is almost 100% sand, some of the soil. They have sand mining and those sorts of things, real high quality sand. But of course any kind of urine spot is going to go straight through the soil profile into the water. So completely opposite nitrogen risk profile. And in the middle, we have where most of our waterways are. So riverbank erosion is prevalent, particularly down further in the catchment. Some great effort, of course, like everywhere else across the country, in planting these sites. But it also has a great opportunity, lots of seepage wetlands, lots of critical source areas before it goes into the Manawatu. Now bear with me, because the point of this is the catchment context, I suppose, and that we've got to treat different parts of the catchment differently. So if you look at this from just one easy kind of metric, which is, farm planning, we can split farms up into at least 3 different zones. So if you're on the downstream end there, you're probably looking at streambank erosion as a high priority. We're looking at reducing sediment on those stream banks, nitrogen loss because we're in these sandy soils. If you're in the upper part of the catchment in those peat soils, you're really looking at phosphorus loss. So, whether that's around different types of fertiliser, timing of application, maybe grazing management, drain management as well. It's highly drained. But also we've got these lakes as well, so high biodiversity assets too. And remember, nitrogen loss is extremely low in those areas. If you're in the middle, you're probably looking at somewhere in between, but the real opportunity in a farm plan would be around critical source area management, sediment loss, and things like enhancing those wetlands for denitrification. So working towards a catchment goal, I guess. So that's really different, and someone mentioned LiDAR. I think Paul definitely mentioned LiDAR. This is going back probably about 8 years where LiDAR wasn't particularly good in the country. Now it's much better. But the opportunity for the farmers in this catchment as well is to understand where and what sort of edge of field interventions they put in. And so much smaller catchment, quite flat. So the opportunity to put in things like sediment traps. They did do some constructed wetlands, bioreactors, detention bunds as well. So the opportunity there was mapped out, like where do we do these things? And again, it's not in 20% of the catchment, it's only in about 1 or 2% of the catchment that we need to do that. Because the water flow tips down, water's flow in a certain place, we can do something with it. Anyway, so that's a simplified approach, and it's just one approach. The opportunity to use mapping, and most catchment planners like myself use far too much maps. But it could be high country erosion that you're using prioritisation for, it could be land use capability, could be habitat types. It's all dependent on your outcomes. And I guess that Manawatu example was really an outcome around water quality. So keep that in mind. So the last bit of this presentation really is just thinking about catchment context and operating things differently versus regulation. So that catchment context there, so we need to do different things in different farms, in different places. So we want to make sure we're doing the right actions in the right place for the right reason. Whereas I think, tell me if there's any regulators here that think otherwise, but I think I've heard this, is that I guess national NES and those sorts of things are very broad brush, and they kind of have to be, I suppose. And the typical, the typical thing that we go for is good management practice, things like stocking rate we have in the Waikato, winter stocking rate. You'll be very familiar if you're a dairy farmer and what's it called, the One Plan, about nitrogen loss targets. Those are really typical regulatory sort of instruments, and of course it goes from targeted, like we have on the left-hand side here, to kind of broad brush. For typical reasons, it's a really important part of our landscape of managing land and water. But it's typically implemented at farm scale, right? It's not typically done at a catchment scale, and it's using simple, easy to understand measures. So there's a real even distribution of regulation across the landscape, but unfortunately there's an uneven distribution of impacts, like particularly for farmers. I don't know the Manawatu particularly well, but for example, if we use that Manawatu, if we had an overseer nitrogen loss number, the ones in the upper catchment kind of have to do nothing. And then, like if there's only one parameter, and then the ones in the lower catchment have to do a heap of farm systems change. So it makes it really hard to manage a catchment, I think, appropriately. Yep, so I guess the main question is, does regulation lead to freshwater outcomes alone? And in summary of this one, I guess where I'm getting to is people are super important, and understanding integrated catchment management across all of our sectors, funders, implementers, catchment coordinators, regulators, is probably one of the greatest opportunities we have to make a change in freshwater, land and water, for all the reasons you've heard this morning. Regulation does have an essential place, but it typically misses that catchment context. And I guess the last thing really is catchment management does help you with a high return on investment for communities. It helps you get together as a community, as we've heard, but it helps you focus your effort. Like, it's easy to go down the wrong path, but if you focus on effort, the right place for the right reason, then we should get a huge return on investment. Cool. Thank you.